Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my good friend and colleague, Cara St. returns to the show. Cara is an author and an alternative researcher. She has two great books out at the moment. One is The Sun Thief, and her most recent title is Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, which she co-authored with Harald Kautz-Vella. Dangerous Imagination has just been released in German. Tonight's conversation with Cara is wide-ranging as always. She talks to us about how Prussian ideology is the foundation of the American education system. We then discuss the importance of homeschooling, along with how the puppet masters are doing everything they can to remove our children's innate sense of creativity and imagination. Cara then poses an interesting question. Is Earth the ultimate prize of the predators, and are humans therefore simply collateral damage in that battle? An interesting question that we spend some time pondering. We end the interview with Cara and I sharing our thoughts on how to continue to break free from the matrix in order to bring humanity back to its natural state of existence. And to kick the show off, I asked Cara to give us an update on how her book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, is making inroads internationally. And here is what she had to say. So, Cara, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mike.
And it's always a pleasure having you on.
Oh, it's like talking to an old friend.
It is.
One of the first people who let us into the United States. Thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you. You guys are great. I love having the both of you on the show. I was going to ask you about your book now and getting it into different languages. And how's that coming along?
Well, it is coming great. We, as you know, and as your audience knows, the German-speaking people in Europe are extremely interested in all of these topics, and they try to stay up to date, and they dig, and they want to know exactly what's going on. So it's been extremely easy for us to find ways to get our work into German. And of course, Harald is German, so that's how I met him. So he does our translating for us. We would also like this book to be out in Spanish. That's our first goal. We have had a couple of people step forward who are more than willing to translate it, but it will cost us money. So, you know, best thing that could possibly happen, and this is a big dream, although there are people out there like this, somebody who's extremely skilled and talented in translating American English and idioms and things like that into Spanish. That's always the issue. I write in American English, and that can be, because it's idiomatic, you have to make that. You have to make that translate into Spanish. So if there's anybody out there who's really, really good at that and feels very desperately in need of contributing to this kind of cause, and we'll do it for very little money, please make yourself known, because we really want it out in Spanish. I also want it out in Japanese, but last time I was on the show, do you remember I was talking to Ben Fulford about that?
Right.
And trying to figure out how to get. Everybody's too scared of it in Japan. Nobody will touch it. They don't. And if Fulford can't help us get it into Japanese, then I don't think anybody can. And frankly, his all of his emails were assaulted and erased, and his whole thing got messed with when he started trying to help us. So obviously nobody wants this out in Japanese. So, but that will be sort of our next stop, I think, getting it into the Asian countries. I did have, after appearing on the Basis program, I had some orders from Beijing. Not really sure who's ordering it from Beijing, whether it is CIA/Beijing, NSA/Beijing wants to see what we're saying, or if it's actually somebody who might be in the alternative community, because, China is something that we can talk about as well, because I actually have learned a lot since I wrote the book, particularly about education and the Prussians. We can talk about the Prussians for sure. Mm-hmm. And the Prussian education system is global, and there are people like Thomas Sheridan, who you may or may not know, who's an alternative speaker, and another Irishman out there talking up a storm, and he talks about the fact that every royal house in Europe is actually that's the Prussian stock. That's from Prussia, as far as he's concerned. That's where that's coming from. And we know that the royal house in England is German.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows that.
Yep.
It's just that changed their name to Windsor in the Victorian era, so that it wouldn't be so blatantly Germanic. But according to Thomas Sheridan, every royal house in Europe is basically from this Prussian bloodline. In fact, let me just start right there, because it's extremely interesting, number one. And number two, you should be looking this up yourselves out there, okay? Because it matters. In the book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, one of the first things that we tackle is this the schooling system within which we are all held prisoner in the United States and globally. These are exercises in subjugation, and I can't say it enough. If you love your children, get them out of these schools, okay? That's, get that out of the way right now. However, what it is I'll say again, the history briefly was that Prussia is a synthetic entity. Prussia was, can't remember the date now, but it's been quite some time ago, maybe 900 AD, 1000 AD, 1100. We'll check that date for you. But
So about 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, the Teutonic Knights, this group called the Teutonic Knights that we've all sort of heard of vaguely, were sent from was sent from the Middle East, from Jerusalem, from the Holy Land, from the Crusades, by the Templars. Of course, the Templars end up being behind everything. They were sent back to Germany, the land that is Germany, and they actually collected up about 172 tribes, Germanic tribes that were sort of, feudally situated and warring with each other and all of that. But they were what we would call the German blood stock, the German people. The Teutonic Knights gathered them together, united them under their power, their authority, and called it Prussia. Okay, it used to be huge. Prussia was absolutely huge. Time went by, yes, and you had Frederick the First, and then his son Frederick the Second. I'm talking about the 18th century, 19th century. Okay, they were psychotics, just like every other royal family in existence today. They're from that empathy-free, bloodthirsty, psychotic bloodline. They're born that way. And in their families, in their blood, their genetic makeup, to have somebody born with empathy and feelings and compassion for humanity, that would be an aberration. That would horrify them. And they would have to do something about fixing that. So Frederick the Second was in fact born like that. For them, he was this strange, weird, why does he care, child, and actually was gay as well. And so as he got to be a young man, he fell in love with a fellow, yeah, and they had a relationship, and it absolutely appalled his father, Frederick the First, and knowing this guy's got to take over my kingdom and all of that, and how's he going to run my Prussian army if he's, got all these feelings. Anyway, so what Frederick the First did, right? What Frederick the First did was capture this guy's, Frederick the Second's love interest and execute him. He guillotined him right in front of Frederick the Second, and apparently, it's an interesting thing that happens to people when they actually see a beheading. It causes this out-of-body experience for people. It's almost like an LSD experience. They come unglued,
Yeah.
they shatter, they fracture, which is one of the reasons tangentially I'm kind of interested in this information that keeps popping up that there are guillotines in these camps, these FEMA camps. Have you seen that information?
I have run across it a couple of times, but I have not gotten into it in great detail.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's
Yeah.
interesting that they're saying that in particular. When you understand what happens to a human being when they witness a beheading, this is what happened in the French Revolution with all the rioting and the euphoria, and people which just went bananas when they watched these beheadings in public. Anyway, so Frederick the Second, poor guy, had to watch his love interest be killed this way, and that's exactly what happened to him. He went absolutely insane, bananas. And when he was finally calmed down, I guess you could say, he was the worst of all of them. He had gone well beyond their wildest dreams back into psychosis. And he took up the reins of ruling Prussia from his father and the army, and it became a situation where the Prussian army to say they were undefeatable is just an understatement. They were a machine. This was an army with a country attached to it. And it was they were for hire, I think. They marched across Europe and they did what they were told to do. And in fact, it was such a bloodthirsty arena to be in that you were far more likely to be killed by your superior officer in the Prussian army than you were by an enemy. And I will say, this is a little factoid I'm going to stick in because it's extremely interesting. By 1776, which is a bit prior to what I'm talking to you about right now, because I'm getting ready to hit the year 1806. But by 1776, there was a law in Prussia that every woman had to register the onset of their monthly menses with the police. Okay, this is Prussia. All right, this is crazy. This just gives a new definition to crazy. So, 1806, Napoleon defeats the Prussian army at the Battle of Jena with his amateur, by definition, this amateur army defeats the King of Prussia, and that could not be tolerated. It simply could not be tolerated. So we have the King of Prussia and everybody he can muster with a brain and some influence and trying to come up with a way to figure out how it happened and how to prevent it from happening. And the best thing that they could figure, and they were right, of course, was to capture the children in the schools and indoctrinate them in such a way that the only reason they had to live, the highest good that they could think of, was to die for their king. And do we not live in that sort of situation now? Sacrificing yourself for the ideals of your nation.
Yeah.
This is Prussian. This is absolutely Prussian. So this is the school system that we have right now. I want you to understand this is our school system right now, and it's only gotten worse. In 1818, this was rolled out in Prussia, and at that time, the French Minister of Education was on hand and actually saw how this was working and took it home to France. He was elated on behalf of his imperial employers, because this was really going to work. And 1850, we have probably covered this material a little bit, but in 1850, this is when Horace Mann, who, by the way, was no angel of educational ministry, he was a lawyer working for the coal interests in New England, and they wanted to know how to keep from having an empowered working force. That was what that was all about. They wanted, the machinists and the immigrants who came and thought they should have some say in how their lives go. They wanted that eradicated immediately, and they heard tell of this amazing thing in Prussia that was working like, gangbusters. And so Horace Mann went over, had a look, brought it back, tried to get it compulsorily foisted on the American public. Took him forever to do it. It was Massachusetts. You're not in Massachusetts, are you? No, you're not. Yeah, Massachusetts. Actually, the governor in Massachusetts bravely, courageously fought this off forever. At the time, I don't remember the name of the governor at that point, although I should, because really he's to be commended. There was this Board of Education that was formed, that was funded by an industrialist. Horace Mann was part of this, trying to get the Massachusetts state legislature to make this form of schooling compulsory. And he kept saying no, and he kept showing them the door and saying, thank you very much. We know what's going on here. Here's your money back. Goodbye. And then finally they managed to buy someone. I'd like to know which one it was, honestly, but they managed to buy one state legislature, and by one vote, they brought back the Board of Education. And that was the first state that was able to mandate compulsory education. And as you and I both know, that the first children who went to these schools under those conditions had to be marched there by the National Guard because their parents were rioting. Their parents were absolutely beside themselves with rage that this was happening, because they knew what was going on. Of course, that's what was going on, and it's what's going on today. And then you add the industrialists with compartmentalizing everything so that everything is specialized and nobody knows what anybody else is doing, and that you have a biology teacher, you have an algebra teacher, you have a music teacher. There's never anybody in the normal structure of a school who just teaches. By the way, that's how Waldorf schools operate. Plugging my own pedagogy shamelessly. Yes, we are. We teach everything because all human beings can do it all. Not because we're special, but because we're trying to remind everybody that everybody can do it all.
Yeah.
And by showing the children that, they never question whether or not, don't I need a special teacher to learn biology? Oh my God. No, you don't. You just don't. Human beings are amazing. So anyway, so you add the industrialists and you add Pavlov, and all of a sudden it's animal training in the schools, and we're changing classes to the ringing of a bell. Okay? I mean, it's just insane. And then what I discovered recently was right after Mao Zedong and the Chinese Revolution, Yeah, the Communist Revolution. Who do you think showed up over in China for about 3 years? This guy called John Dewey, who was a teacher. Not only was he a big old Fabian socialist, but he taught, I think, at Columbia University, the education department. He was, the guru in training teachers to be this, this thing that we were unleashing on our children. So he spent about 3 years over there, and of course you had a vastly confused population. Where just after the revolution, they were dazed, they had bewildered, they had absolutely no idea what to do next. And we ride to the rescue with this idiotic form of schooling, and now there it's just a hive mind. I mean, it just helped solidify the hive mind in China. So
what's difficult, Cara, is as you're explaining this, I'm thinking about the school system today, and people are just, and I'm talking about people, I'm talking about the parents. Most parents are so indoctrinated. They do not understand that they're sending their kids off to an indoctrination center. It's a conveyor belt system.
Right.
It is to generate an end product, a result that is standardized and uniform.
Yeah.
And if you fall outside those quote-unquote standards, that's why they have standardized testing, then your kid is declared abnormal or learning challenged or whatever it may be.
Right.
So it's very, very hard to break the code on this thing. In fact, I have a friend of mine who is a homeschool mom, and she's a good lady and she's very smart, and she took her kids out of the school because the amount of stress and pressure that was put on the kids to push onto them a standardized, conforming type of an agenda. I'm not even going to call it a curriculum. It's an agenda with Common Core and all that stuff. And these homeschoolers they're vilified.
I know they are.
They are vilified.
But they got to stand their ground. They have to understand that they are what's standing between. There are certain things that are the last frontier. Right. The people who are standing between freedom and total subjugation. And believe it or not, the homeschoolers are really on the front lines of that. Okay? There's a couple of things, and I don't really want to talk about it necessarily, but the other thing that I know, and that those people in Europe who are paying attention to what's going on in the world understand without a doubt, and I want you all to understand this in the United States, is that the other thing one of the few things that's standing between the entire world and the New World Order is the United States Second Amendment. People have to get how so much is hanging by a little thread on that one amendment, and the fact that Americans refuse to give up their right to bear arms. That is why there's so much going on right now to try to get the guns away from the Americans. But I will tell you that Europeans who understand how things work, people who are really keeping track of these things in the alternative community, very much understand that it's the Second Amendment that we're counting on. We're counting on the United States Second Amendment right now until we can figure out how to save ourselves in other ways. But the homeschoolers as well, in Germany it's illegal to homeschool your child. They will take your child away from you if you try to do that. You have to leave the country. And there's a reason for that, because exactly what we're just talking about right now. And you have to also understand, you're talking about standardized tests.
Right.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to relate. First of all, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story that I love now. My children, because I've talked to you about my kids, and I somehow always end up bringing them up because they're just terrific people. But the oldest one, when he was in middle school here, at the time I was ready to kill him, and his headmaster, his principal, the top of his head almost blew off when this happened. But he was taking one of these standardized tests. It was huge. It was like 8 or 9 pages, right? And instead of filling in the little dots after every freaking question, he wrote, "I am a fish." I'm a fish, 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 after every question. So he must have written that about 180 times. And at the time, we got called into the principal's office. And at the time, I was like, oh, hell, come on, man, what are you doing here? But now, it's one of his shining moments as far as I'm concerned. Go, boy, go.
Non-conformity.
Do that, yeah? So anyway, so there's that. But the thing that I think, one of the things that people need to realize about these standardized tests is that these schooling systems are part of a eugenics movement as well. And it's really hard to understand how that is true unless you have some of the information. But there was a time, I think, I'm going to say it was late 1800s, early 1900s, but we can check these dates. It's in my book, but I don't have stuff memorized anymore. The Rockefellers and the Fords in Texas, they were supporting this fellow at the University of Texas who was doing some eugenics studies. And so they decided, wouldn't it be groovy if we formed our own board of education down here in Texas just to study this idea? And the idea, what you're saying, one of the things that came out of that is this idea of selecting breeding stock, okay? And one of the ways we select breeding stock is by making sure that the children who don't conform, who don't meet the goals of these standardized tests, who don't, fit in the criteria that they're putting forward, are selected out for breeding purposes. And they are selected out for breeding purposes because the children in school with them see them as defective, see them as less than, see them as not worthy of dating and, marrying and
right, they're
breeding
outcasts.
with. I mean, this is selective breeding, folks. This is a science program. And the schools are at the forefront. I mean, everything that happens, everything that comes down the pike, whether it's behaviorism, whether it's the Tavistock Institute, whether it's the Frankfurt School, whether it's political correctness, whether it's any of that stuff that comes down the pike, goes straight into the schools. That's where it goes. It goes to the children because they're trying to change our children from the very beginning on up. And so unless you get your child out of those schools, it's really difficult. Although sometimes it's just up to the child. All three of my children have walked away from traditional education. See, I said it myself. Don't say that. It's not education. From traditional schooling, they've walked away, shut the door, and I'm glad. But what happens is, because everybody in this country is so conditioned to then think that there's something wrong with children like that, they pay a huge price for that. And it's difficult for them to not say, okay, what's wrong with me then? Because I'm not going down the traditional path. I'm not meeting the criteria of success. So we have to support them as they try to break that barrier too.
Well, we do. And, it's like with so many things. You have the critical thinkers are vilified by the ignorant. And this is really disturbing to me because you have people who are they're not critical thinking. They're not free thinkers. They don't do any research. They don't know anything about history. Yet they're all over people who are using their critical thinking capacities, and taking their kids out and saying, look, it's not one size fits all. My child is a human being. They are creative. They have an imagination. Right. And they're going to be very good at certain things and maybe not so good at other things. So what we want to do is we want to really develop those things where they excel at.
Yes.
And not that we don't want to teach those other things, but we want to make sure that we have them to be the very best they can be in whatever it is that they're very good at.
Right.
You don't have that in schools. In fact, on another show, I had mentioned that the first thing that these schools do whenever they have a budget cut is they take theater and arts out.
Yeah.
All the creativity and all the imagination types of stuff out the door.
Right. It's the imagination, which is another thing that I talk about all the time right now, and I want everybody to start thinking about this again. Think of all the ways that your imagination and your ability to use it and your tendency to want to use it naturally has been vilified and minimalized. Okay? Oh, it's just your imagination. Oh, it's a flight of fancy. Oh, you're daydreaming, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I will tell you something. The one thing that I have come to know, but more than anything else in this last journey through this last book, is that our imagination is our power. Our imagination is the translator. That's the best word I've come up with so far. I think it fits. Between the morphogenic field, what's out there, and what we manifest on this plane. We do that. We do that with our imagination. That's how important we are. We matter. We matter like crazy in this universe. We are unique. I think we may be the only entities that can do that. Because if we were not the only entities that could do that, we would not be under such constant attack.
Right.
Okay? We take what's in the morphogenic field, which I call the Ur, and there's just no way to translate that word. It's German. There's no way to translate that word into English necessarily because it is that original prototype. It's the prototype of the prototype. It's the stuff of which everything is made. But we, with our imagination, can access that. That's our job. We are filters in a way. And our job is to access that, translate that, whatever is our imagination says we need to translate onto this plane, this material plane, which, yes, is a hologram. But you know what? It used to drive me crazy because I hated the word hologram. I thought, no, come on, that's so negative. That's not what's going on. That's what the predator is placing around us, this hologram. But you know what? There are two holograms. There's the organic hologram, which is what we manifest, and the inorganic hologram, which is what's manifested by the predator. And anything that you see that's lifeless, anything that you see that has no reason to exist or just isn't quite making it, like, for example, a computer is a very lame substitute for your brain. No matter what amazing things that you think a computer, your brain is way better. That's all it is. It's a dim copy, a replica of a brain, yes? Right. Or cloning. Or, Sophia Smallstorm talks about the silent forest, which is these rows and rows and rows of trees that do not harbor life, but that yield timber and things for use. But they are not enlivened. There is no life. They have no life. We are the only ones who can do that. As co-creators and manifesting things from the morphogenic field to this plane, we are the only entities that can enliven what comes through. And we do that via our imaginations. Now, at the turn of the century, our right hemispheres and left hemispheres talk to each other because that's natural. I mean, why wouldn't they? If you think about it, why wouldn't they be in communication with each other? It was through the industrialists compartmentalizing everything and then forcing us to work and live in an environment where the only thing that really mattered was the fact that we turned the same screw to the right 57 seconds out of every 60 because that was our job. And it was the only thing they wanted us to know. And so that shuts down. It's like everything else. If you're plugged into something that deadens your capacities, then this is what kind of tends to sever our right brain from our left brain. Which is why it's so damned important that you have the arts in your child's life. Music, painting, let them draw, let them doodle. Right. Theater is hugely important. This imagination, trying on various roles and coming up with scenarios. My God in heaven, that's what we do all day, every day as people. Try on different roles and come up with scenarios. It's our job. Yeah. So if you take the theater out of your child's life, and it's another thing I can tell you right now. They will tell you that the theater doesn't matter, that it's an after-school kind of thing in public schools, if it happens at all. You know what, guys? My kid got a scholarship from that. It was worth like $500,000. Okay, so do you tell me that biology matters more than theater? It doesn't, and it doesn't get you into university. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
This is cookie cutter stuff that
Yep.
you're okay. Well, I've got my biology and I've got my algebra. Not to say that those things aren't important. Okay, they are. But I'm just saying, it's the creative stuff that's really important.
Well, they're important to the degree that they're even truthful. That's the other thing. They teach the sciences, and I'm not going to get into great detail on this. There's a lot of stuff in the sciences that they teach that is highly questionable.
It's absolute bullshit.
And so the kid walks out with an education in science bullshit, and he thinks that, or she thinks that they've got an education in that particular curriculum. It's just unbelievable to me, And the more digging you do, and I'm talking to the audience now because I know Cara knows this, but the more digging you do, the more research you do, the more you go into that rabbit hole, man, I'm telling you what, your head is going to spin.
That's right. You're not going to believe the lie.
The lie is
unbelievable. The whole damn thing. You can start over. Hit the reset button because it's all bullshit.
It is.
And when you say that, I mean, when I say, okay, there's lots of things that can come, there's little segues that, I can mention right now that I haven't done enough research, unfortunately, on to bring these things in their entirety. But one of them in particular, there's a German academic, a German intellectual, I can't remember his name right now, but I will get it to Michael, who has done very credible work academically sound work that suggests very strongly that in the 14th century, at about that time, history was rewritten. History was rewritten, and it was in 1400. So there weren't a lot of people in 1400 that were actually writing things down.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a very select few that could be managed. And it wasn't until 1400 that we used the term AD, Anno Domini, after the years that the whole thing was really concocted.
Winston Churchill said that history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
This was about concocting, I suppose I'm going to offend some people now, but this was about concocting the Roman Catholic version of the Christ story, Christianity, and making that be what the Vatican wanted it to be to control us. That's really what that effort was. So you can say that everything you've read, you could say everything that you've read, that is supposedly history from the year 1400 back was concocted by a set of folks in the year 1400. That is absolute bullshit. Okay, and that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me in the least, because I have this whole. If you don't understand what the Vatican has done to this planet in an effort to capture this planet, then that's another thing that you need to start looking into. But there's that. Okay, and what was the other thing I was going? Oh, another thing I really like talking about right now. First of all, is radical thinking. I've gotten to the point, Michael, where you think it's been bad before. I really, at this point, don't give a damn what anybody thinks about what I'm saying it, how I'm saying it, or where I'm saying it. So
you go, girl.
Put your hand on the volume button, okay? Because you may want to turn me off. Although I know you can edit me, so that's good, right?
No, I'm not going to edit anything.
But, okay, so here's the thing. And let me just give you the incident that led me to really feel this way right now. 2 months ago, maybe, something along those lines, there was a report out of, I believe it was Kazakhstan, but it was someplace right in that area of the world. There was a herd of antelope. Did you read about this? You might have seen it on my page or something. There was a herd of antelope, about 250,000 strong, a very rare form of antelope that had been brought back from the verge of extinction painstakingly. Beautiful animals, bigger than we are. Gorgeous land animals, yeah? And in the space of about 2 weeks, 125,000 of them dropped dead. Dropped dead in 2 weeks, okay? Scientists went to perform, necropsies immediately to try to find out what was going on. And they did say, before they got to the carcasses, they did say, look, there are a couple of pathogens that could have made them very ill. There's no question about that. However, they would not have died. They would not have died had their immune systems not been so grossly affected and diminished. That's not just this antelope herd. That's all of us. That's every creature with a cellular physicality, carbon-based, whatever, however you want to describe it, on this planet. And that's from everything that we're eating, drinking, and breathing, folks. Our immune systems are crashed. They're crashed in a big way. And we have to work really hard at reviving them, number one. We have to learn how to revive them. And then we have to do end runs around all of the big pharma and the big food industries that are trying so desperately, especially in the United States, to keep us sick, because they're pulling things off the shelves that make us better. I used to take humongous amounts of niacin, B3, loved it. I took, right after my mom died, I took probably 3,000 milligrams a day because I was so depressed. And it's an antidepressant. It's a massively effective, brilliant antidepressant and detox. And I've taken it since then, but now you can't buy it. It's being taken off the shelves. And it's being taken off the shelves because they want to sell you antidepressants.
Right.
It's really that simple. So, okay, so then anyway, there's this herd of antelope that died. And when I saw that, I said, I'm not going to say what I'm thinking right now, but I said, that's it. I'm done. I don't care. I don't care what I say, where I say it, or who I say it to. This has got to stop. I've had enough. I've just freaking had enough. So everybody's going to have, I suppose, that moment. But if you can't think of 125,000 beautiful antelope just dropping dead, just because some mad scientist wants to run a medical experiment on us from the sky, which is what's going on. Okay, these are psychotics running experiments on us from the sky all the time and being allowed to do that by this sort of apex predator. I think this is my opinion is there are more than one predator, because what I get, visual I get, Mike, is like, sort of like a Henry VIII character with all these minions around them that, that they're throwing putrid meat to if they do their bidding, kind of thing, but I think that's the people who are running the medical experiments on us from the sky. I think at the apex, and Harald agrees with me, although I'm not sure that I agree that it's sentient oil that's active. I'm not sure I understand him properly. Let me put it that way, because he has a real idea of what the artificial intelligence is at the top of the pyramid. I think he thinks it's the sentient oil that landed here on meteorites, because there are two kinds. Did we get into that the last time we talked with Harald?
Yes.
That there were two kinds. Okay, so that is not news. Okay, so that there are two kinds, and one's natural and one came from an alien
And
source.
I'll put that show in the show notes, Cara, so the audience can take a listen.
Yeah, you should, because I think it's important that we really get that into our brains. But the apex predator is this compassionless, relentless, you would almost have to call it an artificial intelligence. But what that apex predator is after is our ability to access the morphogenic field. In my opinion, that ultimately is what's going on. And the target, I think we're collateral damage in a way. We're suffering from the mad scientists who are getting thrown this putrid meat, That's what's affecting us. In a sense, I think that the real target is Sophia. The Holy Grail is the planet that we're living on. Okay, we're shepherds, we are guardians, we are exceedingly important to this cosmic being that we're living on, that John Lamb Lash calls Sophia. And he's right, by the way. He's absolutely right. I know that in my every piece of intuitive, cell in my body, that we're living on this entity that could be termed Sophia, that is definitely a cosmic entity that voluntarily appeared in this time and place to do whatever it is that she's supposed to be doing, and there's an ascension involved, and the planet, And one of the things that a couple of things. Let me back up really quick before I get into the major thing that I've been thinking about lately. But the first thing I want you guys to think about in terms of radical thinking is how human beings sustain themselves. And I'm having a bit of a deja vu right now, so maybe Mike and I've talked about this before. However, my opinion, combined with some actual scientific research now that's come out of the University of Saarbrücken, states that we use in our bodies, through our bodies, we utilize something like 25,000 energy units. Can't call them calories because they're not, but energy units of some sort that are probably photon based, which means light. Every day we use that many energy units through our body to do what it is that we're doing when we're conscious, Has absolutely nothing to do with the 1,500 or 2,500 calories that we chew and eat as food, all right? My question to you right now is, where does that come from? Where does that come from? How is it human beings sustain themselves? If you know that is in fact the case, in fact, that's been measured now. If you need the science, I don't need the science, but a lot of people do, and that's fine. But if that's been measured now, where does that come from? In my opinion, obviously, it comes from the sun. We are light processors. We are photon synthesizers. We are filters. People call us there are people who will call us filters. I think we are filters. There's a photosynthesis component going on, which is one of the reasons that when this whole thing started, one of the primary goals was to get between us and the sun. That's what the whiteout is about. If you see pictures supposedly from space of our planet now, it's covered in this white, cloudy film now. There's no more, you really can't see the blue water anymore like you used to be able to. When you saw those pictures from space, it was so beautiful. It's now like a total whiteout. And that's to try to get between us and the sun, because we use photons as our primary source of energy. And if you want to call it food, I call it sustenance. And what that leads me to think about, and the reason I started the way I started thinking about this is that I started wondering why we ate anything, really. Because I've given up meat. I try very hard to give up dairy. That's a really difficult one for me because that's dealing what that's dealing in is, grief. That's dealing in grief because you've got animals that are kept pregnant, but their babies are taken away from them, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So you're really just dealing in grief it's also very difficult because we are so tremendously addicted to dairy substances. So I'm struggling with that right now, but I gave up meat a long time ago. And why do we eat anything? I'm not all that sure. We are in a belief system. I always have to say that first. We are in a very, very deep, real belief system that will affect us. And so I'm not advocating that you stop eating. Okay? I'm not advocating anything along those lines. However, I will have to say, I don't believe that life feeds on life anymore, okay? I'm sorry, I don't. I just don't believe it. And I didn't believe it intuitively for a long time. And then I didn't believe it because I also saw this research that was proving that mostly what we do is use photons for energy and for sustenance. So can you imagine, Michael, what the world would be like without food production companies and fast food outlets, and what would happen to the trash situation on the planet?
Well, it's an interesting concept, right? Something has to die in order for you to live. And when you think about that, you think to yourself, you know what? When you put it that way, it doesn't seem right.
No, it's not right. It's amoral as hell.
Yeah.
Immoral. It's not even amoral. It's immoral.
You know, Cara, I wanted to go back to the sun for a second because you're absolutely right. I mean, they're spending enormous amounts of time, energy, and money blocking the sun with the aerosol spraying program. And if you're listening to this show and you don't believe that they're chemtrailing, then you could just click off now and go back to sleep. Okay, just go back to sleep.
You're still there, man. If you're still there, I don't know.
It's it's going out and just smearing yourself with sunscreen, which has been found unequivocally to be very dangerous to your health. I'm noticing, and I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, and I'm just going to take a little detour here. It used to be I would be outside doing some yard work, and let's just say it was, I don't know, 70, 75 degrees outside. And I'm going back, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you never felt a burning sensation on your shoulders or your arms, ever.
Right.
Now, if you go outside and you're doing yard work and it's 70, 75 degrees, your arms, and I know my neck and my shoulders, it feels very, very hot.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that I've concluded is that whatever they're doing up in the sky with the spraying, the UVB rays, which is the burning radiation that comes down, is far more prevalent now than it ever was.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, I just want to call that out.
It all out. Yeah.
I want to call that out because I've noticed it, and I've spoken to other people and said, hey, have you noticed that when you're outside, the temperature, when you look at the thermometer, doesn't show that it's that hot.
Right.
But you're outside working, and it feels like it's like 10, 15, 20 degrees warmer than it actually is because your body's feeling it.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I think that's very specific to the United States, Mike. That's one of the things I've noticed. We were just talking that I've only been back in the States for about 8 days because I'm visiting and I don't live here. But it is one of the things I noticed almost immediately when I go out for a run or whatever. The temperature does not register as that high, but it's almost unbearable to be outside.
Yes.
It's absolutely horrible. You can feel this thing on your skin. It's like a burning, and whatever that is, whether it's the sun or a combination of the sun and the chemical that they're using or whatever it is, it's not. And and you look at the humidity and it's not really that high, but it feels like holy hell out there.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're describing, and it's very specific to the U.S. I've come from I live in England now. I've spent a lot of time in Germany. I spent a lot of time in France, and it's not there. It's here. And I want to talk a little bit about what the other things that I've found coming back to the States again, but I don't want to get too far off track with the other stuff first.
Okay.
Which is this idea of how do we sustain ourselves as human beings. It's very important to start meditating on that and to do some seriously radical thinking. And in my book, radical thinking is starting with this idea of, do we need to eat? Do we? Everything that we live in is a lie. Start there, okay? Do we need to drink? Do you know your body produces 8 cups of saliva every day without you doing anything about that? 8 cups of water right there. And I said, I'm not advocating that you stop or start anything. I'm just saying do some really radical thinking about what's been perpetrated on you. And what better way to pollute your body than by, you can't just talk about, I don't think we need to talk about McDonald's necessarily, although that's one of the ways that they got us, poisoned us. But what if it's all of it, Mike? What if it's all of it? We don't know, because we can, so much of what we take into our bodies is via photon energy. So just start to think about that. That's all. Just start to think about things like that, because when we start to entertain radical notions like that, that's when things start to open up for us. Okay? The other thing I want to talk about right now, and this is something that happens periodically, Harald and I will start thinking about something at the same time, but we won't realize that we're doing it, and then we'll sort of come together. We've both been thinking about the Cozy Rev mirror, which you probably have heard of. Yeah?
Yep.
Some of the information that you can get about the Cozy Rev mirror, there's not really a lot right now. David Wilcox put, I think in his latest book, his first chapter was about the Cozy Rev mirror, which is great, but it's not really the information that I was after. But it is something that you can read to familiarize yourself with the physics. If you go on YouTube and type in Cozy Rev mirror, it's Kozyrev, you can get some poorly made Russian documentaries with really awful subtitles that are very much worth sitting through, okay? Because this guy was a Russian, and he was one of those avatars, okay? He developed this mirror, which is nothing more than a tube of aluminum. Aluminum is being the key here, that has an effect on time, has an effect on space, and has an effect on your conscious ability to transmit, to communicate symbols globally. You can communicate something that's in your mind to someone who's also, I think, in another Kozyrev contraption on the other side of the planet. Okay. Obviously, this is really important stuff that was suppressed. And it's still being suppressed. There's very little you can find on it, but it's like Wilhelm, what was his name?
Wilhelm Reich.
Reich. His work was huge. His work was so freaking important that they locked him up and killed him. Yeah? It's like that. And in fact, Kozyrev was locked up. I don't think he died in prison, but they did take him and isolate him. Anyway, the reason this is how Harald and I both started thinking about this. And I don't have, you should get Harald back on as well. But I don't have the fullness of his thinking about this, but what it's leading me to think about is aluminum. And the reason I'm thinking about aluminum is because our planet's being saturated with aluminum nanoparticles. That's been from the very beginning of all of this. And mercury as well. And we're getting that collaterally because we're breathing and we're showering and we're alive on the planet. But what if we're not really the target, Mike? What if it's the planet that's the target and we're just getting this collaterally? And what if Sophia's being saturated in aluminum nanoparticles such that the apex predator can affect time in some way? What if there's what if, I happen to know without any, okay, there is this tale, if you will, which is probably true, that's been told to me by my dear friend Jay Essex, for one thing, about the Anunnaki, and that there are a certain cadre of these folks, these entities still on the planet, who were left here either purposefully or by accident, doesn't matter, still here, and they have some sort of deadline. This is the story. I don't know a lot about it, but I'm just putting it out there because it's a big what if for me. What if this is the case, right? What if there is some kind of deadline What if there's some kind of deadline to prevent humanity and Sophia from ascending? What if that's imminent and it needs to be stopped? Which actually that makes more sense to me. And what if by dousing this entire planet in aluminum, one could slow down time? Radical thinking, Mike.
You know, anything's possible, Cara. Right. I don't take anything off the table, because things that I used to think were strange and bizarre, these things have come full circle, and these things are happening. I mean, just as a simple type of example, many years ago, we would talk about government mind control programs like MK Ultra, and, nobody put any stock in that. And everybody thought, that's ridiculous. They don't do stuff like that. And then now we take a look at what's going on, and all this stuff has come out. And their techniques now, and the technology they have has far surpassed whatever it is that they were doing back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Oh, yeah.
So my point being is that I don't take anything and set it aside. Anything is possible. Your point about maybe humanity is just collateral damage. Maybe the prize is Earth.
Yeah, and I think that the medical experiments that are being conducted on people, on human beings, all the while that this other stuff is going on, this is a prize for the cooperation of these idiots, these psychotics that are helping, the apex predator toward getting what it wants.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Yes, these things are absolutely happening to us, and they are happening on purpose, because how else can you explain a vaccine, which, by the way, is filled with aluminum and filled with mercury? Both of those things lend themselves tremendously to being mirrors. Both of those are mirror items. Aluminum makes a great mirror. Mercury makes a great mirror. These are about communication. Okay, both of those things are about communication in the macro sense and in the micro sense. When they're in our bodies, they turn us into resonators, do they not? So there's a lot going on simultaneously. So yes, we are both being attacked by minor actors in this scenario, and we are collateral damage thanks to the major actors in this scenario. And and this is another reason this came to me, because in my life, this concept of midnight is very, very important. It's one of those, when we're born into any incarnation, it's like we cover ourselves with sticky notes, Michael, that are clues to why we're here this time. Yeah?
Yep.
It's like, okay, we leave ourselves a trail of crumbs every time so that we can do whatever it is that we came to do in this particular incarnation. And one of the biggest things and factors in my life has been this concept of midnight. I was born at midnight. That midnight is between space and time. It is that moment that is not definable within this dimension. When even those of you who think I'm being a nut when I'm saying this right now, when you go to write midnight, don't you have to sit there and go, wait a minute, is it AM? Is it PM? What the hell is midnight? Do you, right?
Yep.
I mean, we all face that every time we want to talk about midnight, because it isn't anything. It's between space and time.
Right.
And one of the things that came to me recently, again, with this radical thinking, is this picture that you and I grew up with, certainly most of us did, especially in the United States, of this doomsday clock where it's ticking toward midnight. And they used it in the nuclear scenario. We just
right.
didn't want to get to midnight, okay?
Right.
Oh, all right. But what is midnight? What if midnight is that space, metaphorically and actually, for us speaking to ourselves as entities, where we're between space and time, and that's the moment we get to ascend? What if do you see what I'm saying? What if that is just this sort of image that they have put out there, like a big fat stop sign? I know I sound crazy these days.
No, go ahead.
I don't care, man. I don't care. This is my thinking. That, that we actually do want to get to midnight, because it's not what we think it is, okay? Being outside space and time, we need to ascend, okay? And that's actually one of the things that started me thinking about time, and then wanting us to not get to midnight, them wanting them. I say them because I don't know how else to characterize it, but the predator trying to keep us trying to keep us from getting to the point where we can actually make our ascension to the next level, claim the DNA that they've switched off, and whatever else it is that we're going to do when we get there. That's what's going to happen at our idea, our picture of that is sort of wrapped up in this idea, I think, of midnight, trying to describe something that there are no words for. And that's really the problem. A lot of things that we need to remind ourselves of, there really aren't any words for, which is how our images have been captured. And that's kind of the book that's sitting on my shoulders right now that's been percolating for about 4 years, this idea of 80% of the ways, 80% of how we communicate with each other is nonverbal. It's through art. It's through visuals. It's through music. It's through sounds. It's through touch. It's through, anything that's not verbal, which is one of the reasons, by the way, that the Vatican has filled its lower chambers with everything that they can capture in terms of art. And, because we communicate with each other via those channels. And sometimes when we look at a visual, it activates something inside us, And so the only thing that they can do is hide that away under the Vatican, these vast, vast tunnels filled with everything they've captured from the entire planet, They don't want us to see any of that.
No.
And instead they've replaced it with Edward Bernay's version of art, which is marketing. Which kind of reminds me, I just want to say really quick while we're talking about marketing, one of the major behaviorists that we have to talk about is John Watson. And he started at Johns Hopkins University trying to determine what it was that would make a baby be afraid of that. Those were his experiments, how to teach a baby to fear, because we're actually not born afraid of anything. But he found out how easy it is to make a baby afraid of things. And so he ran with that and made that information available to everybody, for their nefarious purposes in the world, especially the Tavistock Institute with their art of traumatology and all that. But anyway, this guy, I recently discovered that this guy ended up working in Madison Avenue. He ended up knowing more about the human being at the point of purchase than anybody else on the planet. And he started out at Johns Hopkins as a behaviorist trying to teach babies how to be afraid of things.
Yeah.
Heck of a way to spend your life, right?
Yep. It's, what's amazing to me is that a lot of people do not see the dichotomy that's out there. That, to me, it's very clear that we have a battle between ideologies. One is very evil. Yeah. It's anti-humanity. And then you have that which is light, goodness. And I don't mean good by the standpoint of I'm a good person, I pay my taxes, I'm on a hamster wheel.
Prussian.
Yeah,
that's Prussian.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a good
Prussian.
I'm a good Prussian student. And I don't mean that. What I mean is that there are those that are out there, yourself included, myself, that see a world that should be very, very different, different than what it is today. And there is that battle going on. And so the question, Cara, I want to ask you, and I know this is a tough question, because somebody listening to this, or listening to us, might be saying, wow, they're talking about a lot of stuff, but so, where's the good in this? I mean, how does this thing end?
Yeah.
So how do we answer the question when somebody says, well, sure looks like evil has the upper hand, so where is the force of good in this equation? How do we answer that question?
Well, it depends on what you value, I think. If in fact it looks like evil has the upper hand, it's because I think when you think about those things, it's because you think that their structure is what has value. Evil has the upper hand because if in a world that was filled, if their structure is what has value for you, then in a world that is filled with their structure, then you are being in control of their structure. Do you know does that make sense?
Yep.
Would be for the good, would be your definition of good. Well, why aren't the good, all you're really saying when you think about those kinds of things is that if good people were in control of evil structure, somehow that would be better. But in reality, it's the evil structure that's the problem. And so what we've gotten to now, Mike, is a point in time where we have to start just jettisoning just about everything. Okay? It's the structure that's the problem. It's the inorganic hologram that you're looking at, that you think, if only I had the best car, if only I had the best job, if only I could succeed and go to an Ivy League college, if only this, if only that. You're trying to win at their game. And it's the game that's the problem.
Right.
The game is the problem. So my advice to everybody right now anymore is throw away your TV. For God's sake, get your TV out of your house because it's not redeemable. It was invented to control us. That's the only reason it was invented. That's the only reason it came along. You can't redeem it and restore it to its original task because that was its task, to program us. So turn your TV off, get it out of your house. That's number one. You got to stay with the computer because the computer is the only way we're getting any truth at all. That's the big double-edged sword. That can be turned to the good because all of us are being guerrilla communicators and going under flying under trying really hard to fly under their censorship and get information to each other.
Yeah, the technologies, we have to utilize the technology. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Send smoke signals up? I mean,
exactly. You got to
right.
stay with the computer for now.
Right.
Okay. And get your kids out of the schools for sure. Absolutely. Especially in the United States. While you can get them out of the schools, there are alternative schooling paradigms out there. If you are somebody who both of you have to work and that kind of thing, go to the Waldorf schools. Okay, blatantly, I'll tell you that right now. Don't go to schools that are just becoming private schools, but using the same schooling. That's not what I mean at all. You've got to have a completely different paradigm. So start looking into those kinds of things. If you can't afford that, but you can stay at home, you can get these materials and use them at home yourself. There are people putting them out there on the internet for your use at home, and don't be afraid of that because you can do it. Okay. And then hit the reset button. Put it all down. First of all, stop joining the freaking military. Okay. I'm sorry, but if you don't go fight, if you don't become part of that machine, then there won't be a machine. All right.
Right.
I can't, this comes from the Prussian army. This comes from the Tavistock Institute, which is a war machine.
Right.
These are blood sacrifices. They roll out the same recipe on us constantly over and over and over again. William Engdahl calls them the color revolutions. It's just pick out a recipe and run this on, the Ukraine, or pick out this recipe and run it on Malaysia now, drop all their planes. I mean, it's all recipes, and they were all invented by the Tavistock Institute, and you're falling for it every single time. And it has absolutely nothing to do with protecting democracy or protecting the United States. Who's going to attack the United States? Has anyone attacked the United States since 1812? Or Pearl Harbor, which was, by the way, manufactured to get us in. I mean, come on, guys. Stop joining the military, please. There are so many other things that you could do.
Well, they need humans to implement their agenda.
They do. You don't have to do that. And
exactly.
Yes, at this point in our consciousness, it's scary because we don't know what remains when we put down all of these toys and step away from them. What remains? But I think that I doubt that it's going to be difficult to figure out because I think once we get rid of all of the noise, it will be right in front of our faces, and it will be like coming home again.
When people say we live in a dangerous world, what I tell them is it's a dangerous world that was created by this cabal, by these elites. Yeah, otherwise, if we didn't have these lunatics running the place, we wouldn't have a dangerous world because nobody wakes up in the morning. I know I don't. My neighbors don't. I don't wake up and say, "Oh, who can I hurt today? Who can I steal from?"
Right. Right.
This whole thing has been built up and implemented by these psychopaths.
Yeah, I know. And it's really difficult to get the kids to understand that,
exactly.
I have these conversations with my own children and they say stuff like, well, but Mom, what about the infrastructure, and what if there weren't taxes and, all this other crap that they've laid on us? Then we would do what we did in 1850, build it ourselves.
Yeah, and they don't have to build infrastructure with our tax money. A government prints its own money. It does its own thing. They don't have to push that debt onto the people. And I had this discussion with somebody in my family, I guess about 2 weeks ago. I was absolutely out of my mind with them. I mean, I had to really, I've gotten much better over time. I just basically have to take a deep breath, take a step back and say, you know what? Some people are just not reachable.
Yeah.
But they don't understand that the whole system, the debt monetary system, is in place in order to keep you as a slave.
Right.
They don't get it.
Money. Yeah. Actually, I'm facing something like that in my teaching career right now. I've got class 3, which is third grade next year, because as a Waldorf teacher, you follow the children all the way through 8th grade. And next year I'm supposed to teach them how to do money, and I'm not going to do it. I must see if I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to do it. I won't do it. I will not do it. And I've told their parents that your children probably know how to count money already. They're 8, 9 years old. You've had them. I'm sure they know how to count money. I would just as soon not teach them how to deal with money. If you want to do that, you do that. Okay, there are other ways to teach them percentages, and I will teach them economics, and I will teach them what the real story is with economics when they get old enough, but I will not teach them how to handle money. I will not teach them how to, pass this black magic back. I can't be responsible for that, Mike. And so let's see if anybody finds out and if I get fired over it. But I'm not going to do it. I won't.
Well, I completely get it. I mean, money
Right?
is there so that you have to pay to live.
Yes. It's a spell. Every
Right.
time you hand a piece of money to another person, you are casting a black spell. That's what that is.
Well, I think the audience needs to take a step back, and before, you guys think that Cara and I are crazy, you have to put it into perspective. If you don't have enough money to rent or buy a home, you have no place to live. You have no shelter. If you don't have enough money to be able to eat, then you're going to starve. If you don't have enough money in order to get medical care, then you're going to get sick and maybe you'll even die. So you have to understand that, and some are going to be listening to this show and say, well, that's just the way it is, Mike. How else would it be? And it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. A country that is representative of its people takes its resources and puts it back into the population, back into the people. It invests in humanity. We are divesting from humanity.
Yes,
That's the big difference.
Yeah.
I always laugh when people say, oh, look at all the money we have to pay for healthcare and everything else. I don't understand this. But in the meantime, half the budget in the United States goes to the military. They're spending trillions upon trillions of dollars developing new weapons and bombs to kill things and people. But none of that thinking process and that money ever comes back to invest in the population, invest in people and humanity. It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah, and you have to realize that money is energy. They've taken what's yours and they've essentially converted it into a piece of paper. And then they've made you work to get it back.
Right.
Okay, that happened in feudal times. That was a trick that got perpetrated on us in the feudal system. I work as a farmer and I, create this massive crop, and then my feudal lord exchanges maybe 2 pieces of gold, I suppose, for the fruit of my labor, and then I have to buy it back.
Right.
Do you see the game? It's just a freaking game. And we're so addicted. Harold calls it a gaming addiction, and he's right. Money is just a gaming addiction. It's a big old game. You're moving pieces around on a board that has nothing to do with anything real, except that they've absconded with the energy, your life energy, and they've turned it into a piece of paper. Now, let's say I was a doctor, okay? Let's say, how could it be different? Let's just say that I was a doctor and I had got myself trained as a holistic let's make it a utopian perfect world. I'm a holistic medical person, and I'm surrounded by 150 or 200 people, and they say, we really like this woman to take care of us, and that would be great. How could we make that work? Well, let's build her a house. All right, we can because we have the talents and the resources and the will to build a house to keep this person sheltered, and let's give some of our food every time we need that I'm growing in my backyard. I'm going to give you some food, and I'm going to give you some eggs and things like that. And maybe I'm a really good seamstress, and I'm a designer of clothing, and I'm going to make clothing for you and your family. And that is how I'm going to trade what I can do in return for your services. That's the proper use of energy. This is the proper use of human energy. If you say to yourself, how the heck am I going to feed my family without money? Or how am I going to clothe myself? This is how we used to do it. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. It's just that this crazy psychotic banking, gaming system got into the mix and blood sucked our energy by turning our energy into pieces of paper.
Well, the problem is what you just laid out there, putting really common unity, as Max Egan says, back into community. People
Yeah.
look at that as, oh, we're going backwards. We've advanced so much
Yeah.
since that time, you know.
Yeah. That's nonsense.
It is nonsense. And the thing is, you have to have a community.
You do. Nothing
Humans
wrong.
are a community being. I mean, that's you know, we're supposed to be interacting. We're supposed to be
Yeah.
interpersonal.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be sharing ideas, thoughts, and creativity. And all of that stuff, if you think about it, folks, you're not doing that anymore. You're
Nope.
probably listening to this show, sitting in a room somewhere completely isolated
Yeah. And
from
you
your
can do
community.
this. You can do this. You know, my recommendation is just to find one way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, find one way to do it, even if it's, I remember 15 years ago when I was in teacher training with a bunch of very busy people who are also in teacher training with children and things like that. What we would do is have, I mean, just something as simple as on Mondays, I make enough food for everybody and we share it amongst all the families, that kind of thing. Do you know? Start someplace really, really simple. And then on Tuesdays, you know, Anne makes enough food for 6 families and we share it. It could be anything. It could be cheap stuff. It doesn't have to be, as long as it's nutritious, you know what I mean, and tasty. Those sorts of things. That way I only have to cook one day a week, but I make enough for 6 families when I do it. Do stuff like that. Get used to being part of a community in a very simple way. And then pretty soon you're fixing somebody's car in return for something else.
Right.
Or, you know, maybe I'm plumbing for you because you can do, you know, something for me, or you can deal with my computer. You know, trade, start bartering back and forth. Barter is not a dirty word. Barter is as human as it gets. Use your skills to help somebody else's skills. And there are communities that are doing this, or you can just do it one-on-one. I love this dinner idea, because if you're out there and you're part of a small group who are just working their butts off, one day a week, make enough, get a group together, and one day a week make enough for like 6 families. And then trade, you know, you got to cook one day a week.
It's going to take at least, in my view, at least a generation, maybe 2 generations to get people back to the thought processes and the thinking that will make humanity great again, bring it back to the point where humans are humans. They have spent thousands of years stealing it and taking it away from humans. And it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take a very concerted effort to get the ship back on track again. And it's not something that's going to get solved in a week, a year, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, it's going to take a long time to get it back. And that's why it's very important that people really start to wake up. They have to wake up.
And these ways are simple and practical, some things that I was just suggesting.
Right.
But if your primary question is, okay, so if we don't do this other stuff, then what do we do? Maybe the best thing that you can do is figure out the stuff that I was just talking about. How is it that we're going to do this? Make that your life's work, and you will be giving a gift to your children and your grandchildren that is beyond counting.
Yeah.
Certainly. Don't leave them a life insurance policy. Okay? Leave them an ability to be part of a community and to get themselves out from under this harness, you know, that they're in right now, and break free. And they can do that with no permission from anybody. They don't need anybody's permission to start this, and neither do you.
You know, it's interesting. My daughter's going to be 30, and for the longest time, I think she thought that her father was a total lunatic.
Oh, mine do. Yeah, sure.
And
my kids think I'm absolutely, or they used to. They're coming around now, though.
Yeah, exactly. So what's happened with my daughter that I've seen over the last few years or so is she's turning that corner, and now we will have discussions, and she will say, "I'm seeing that now, Dad.
Yeah.
I'm seeing exactly what you were talking about, or what you are talking about.
Right.
I see how the game is being played now."
Yes, all 3 of my children have walked away from traditional education, traditional schooling now. They are all 3 evolving into becoming natural healers, which you should be happy to hear because you know these 3. They're all sort of on that path now, which, God bless. I mean, it couldn't get any better as far as I'm concerned. This idea of giving back because you're discovering things about yourself and how, you know, to be a guerrilla natural. healer, that kind of stuff. So, in fact, that brings me to this thing that I don't want to forget to talk about, Michael, because it's important. And this is the thing that we were talking about before we came on air, which is the fact that I've only been back in the States for 8 days. And within a couple of days, I was feeling pretty sick. Not like I had a cold or the flu or anything like that, but I was feeling apathetic, depressed, lethargic. And I'm somebody who really loves it when the sun starts coming up at 4:45 in the morning. I bounce out of bed and I go for a run and all of these sorts of things. And I'd been looking forward to seeing my children for so long. Happy to be here. And then within a couple of days, I couldn't make myself go out the door for a run. Part of that was the feeling I got when I was outside, which was like I was in hell. You know, this feeling on my skin and this heat and this humidity that didn't match the numbers that I was looking at. There was that.
Yep.
But then I finally realized today when I tried to take my son's beagle out for it has to be the water. I've been drinking tap water for a week.
Bad.
And it's the first time I've encountered fluoride for several years.
Yeah.
For one thing. And this is what it is. America, you're drugged. You are drugged beyond your capacity to believe you're drugged. Okay? And I realize how hard it is to get away because you have your sources of water and you have your resources to quote unquote buy water, which is just an abomination. And all of those things. But I'm telling you right now that what's coming out of your tap is killing you, and it's killing you quickly. And it's keeping you down because I've spent a lot of time getting clean and clear in England, in Europe, and coming back within a week I was just dragging within just a few days. So I have to so what am I going to do right now? I'm going to juice. There's a juicer in the house because what's happening as well, it's not just my attitude, it's not just my mental state. My cells, what happens at a cellular level is that your cells try to contain the toxins at a cellular level, so you become constipated. Your body doesn't, it holds water. Your body holds water because your cells are desperately trying to contain the toxins that it's ingesting. So I'm going to juice because that cleans you at a cellular level. And I'm probably going to go out and try to find the purest water that I can find for about a week's worth, 1 liter a day, and do saltwater flushes, which means you take some organic sea salt or some Himalayan pink salt, about a tablespoon, put it in a liter of water, drink it down in the morning. Don't go anywhere because your body's going to try to get rid of that. But this is why you don't drink salt water when you're at sea, because your body will just it will flush that right back out. And it will take that. What that does is it takes the toxins out of your gut. Okay, that doesn't do a lot for the cellular level. With the cellular, you gotta do things like juice to get the poisons out of your cells. Okay. The other thing that I've been doing recently that I recommend highly is I've been taking, and you don't have to do this forever, but what I've been doing is taking massive doses of D3 because you need that vitamin D, like 10,000 IUs a day for about 3 weeks. Okay, get some D3 into your body, and then you can do a maintenance level because they're keeping you away from D. You need D for everything. You need it for everything, okay? D, what else am I taking? B12. Take massive amounts of B12 right now. You can get it sublingually if you want. C, now see, Yashka and I have arguments about this. My husband is this is my husband's purview, his specialty, but he thinks you can take ascorbic acid, just the cheap stuff over the counter, and that's fine. I'm not so sure because my joints always had a problem with ascorbic acid, although that doesn't seem to be the case anymore because I've gotten really clean in what I'm eating and taking. So take 3,000 milligrams. Okay, I'm probably going to get in trouble with the medical community, but I will tell you that I, as my own decision,
what you're doing.
What I'm doing is taking several thousand milligrams of vitamin C every day. Arginine and carnitine and arginine, take that. And I'm taking massive doses of this stuff, okay? Especially the D. And I took these massive doses for about a week, and I felt like super dog all of a sudden. And then you can back off to sort of maintenance levels. But I've just renewed my my stocks of those. They're on the way to me. So that will help because a lot of that is detoxing. You got to get moving. Even when you don't feel like moving, you got to get out there. You got to run or you got to do yoga. I do Iyengar yoga myself because it just seems to be the most rigorous form of it. But get moving. Get your body moving so that your cells try to dump some of this stuff. And I'm telling you this because there's a situation in the United States that does not exist where I live, and that is that you are being drugged via your water supply. Okay? And there's not necessarily a lot that you can do about that in terms of having to drink water. I remember when I lived here, I went and bought distilled water at Walmart. But you know what? They've got to be onto that game. Right? So I can't begin to think what's probably in the distilled water, but you know what it is a game of trying to stay ahead of the poisoning every single day, all the time. It's a race. You know, you're trying to stay ahead of what they're trying to put in your body. So there are things that it's a constant state of detox all the time. It used to be B3. Now you can't get B3 over the counter anymore. So, but this is what I'm going to do to try to get the fluoride back out of my body.
The U.S. is lowering the fluoride levels in the water, and that it was the Department of Health and Human Services is advising cities and towns to reduce their use of fluoride because people now have access to other sources. But the real reason they're doing this is because there's a heightened awareness with regard to fluoride and the implications and the damage that fluoride can do to the body. And it does nothing for teeth. That is just
garbage.
It's garbage, exactly right. My personal feeling is the reason why they're doing this incrementally is because they cannot pull the rug out with regard to fluoride because it's been in the water for the last 60 years or so, 70 years. And to come out and say, you know what, it's a poison. And by the way, the Lancet, which is a Harvard medical journal, came out about a year and a half ago and said fluoride is a neurotoxin. To pull it would mean that there would be gigantic lawsuits, huge lawsuits beyond anybody's imagination. So they're doing this thing very stealth, where they're just kind of pulling back on it.
The other thing you can do about that, by the way, is take flaxseed oil. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Flaxseed oil, yes, repairs and helps build your neurology, your nerve endings.
I have a water filtration system. It costs about $250. This filter removes the fluoride.
Right.
And my water, my drinking water, is not fluoridated. Now, the other problem you have is when you take a shower, there's fluoride in that water, and your skin is like a gigantic mouth. I mean, it's just taking it in. So I also take nascent iodine, which supposedly helps to clear out the fluoride. So there's things you can do, the things you mentioned, and some of the things I'm talking about here, to kind of get help.
Well, and if you're like most people in the world, you don't have a lot of money.
Right.
You know, if you're lucky, you can do. I mean, I remember researching filters and things, Michael, and you try desperately to come up with ways to get the poisons away from yourself and from your children, but maybe you don't have a lot of money, so do lots of research and see.
Right.
Pick the things that you think will do the most good for you, in protecting your cells from poisons. Okay, one of the best things you can do for yourself, that if you only have a certain amount of money, is get a juicer, a masticating juicer if you can. But one of the things that you also should know, this should really piss you off, is that it's much easier and cheaper to buy organic produce in Europe and England than it is in the United States. It's 4 times more expensive here than it is over there. They don't quite understand why we don't eat better in the U.S. Well, we don't eat better because we can't afford to eat better like they can. And that's very much on purpose, by the way. I mean, they're trying to keep us from being able to afford these sorts of things. But you know what? Honestly, there's really no such thing as organic because of cross-pollination anymore. Yeah. Okay? There's greater and lesser forms of pesticide contact. Like, for example, if you buy, a pint of strawberries in a grocery store, it's something like 26 episodes of insecticides it's gone through. I mean, it's something unbelievable. So there are greater and lesser things that you can do by things with thick skins, because there'll be fewer pesticides in the actual, like a banana has a really thick skin, so, it doesn't have as much chance of getting a pesticide into what you actually eat. Do lots of research. If you can only afford save up $100, $150, you can get yourself a good juicer. and start juicing and get the poisons out of yourself at a cellular level.
One of the things I wanted to bring up, and I hope I get this right, but and I think I am, but I read an article, I think it came out with Melissa Melton, Truth Stream Media, I guess about a month ago, but Chevron, I think it was Chevron, was selling fracked water to California, to the farmers, so that they can irrigate their crops.
Because of the drought. What a racket.
So you're talking about, you could get organic, but then these guys in California are putting the remnants of fracking water onto their crops. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and how much of and once again, we're back to this whole thing. How much of that do we need to take in to sustain ourselves? But they've got this whole cycle now going on. And frankly, I think that one of the reasons they're fracking the water is because the water is what holds the Earth's memory. Water is alive. Water is sentient. Yep. Water is actually a nation as far as I'm concerned. And it holds memory, which actually has been proved, scientifically proved that water has a memory. And since there is absolutely no other reason to frack other than to destroy water.
Even the bottled water, right?
Yes. Again, they're after Sophia. They're after the memory of our planet, which makes me wonder if we're not just collateral damage and the psychopaths that are medically experimenting on us are just like cats playing with the mice that they've almost killed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is what you can do for yourself. And I wanted to say this to the population that's listening to Michael's show, because it's only taken me about 8 days to feel this way physically and to figure out what the issue was, because that's what's different.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to the United States.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. If I could just get my kids out of here, I would. It would be a while before I came back, my friend.
Oh, man. I'll tell you.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to cover while we're still...
No, I think we're good. It was very wide-ranging, and I really enjoyed the discussion, Cara, as always. It is. It's good. It's better than some canned radio show. We just talk about whatever.
Anyway, you want to do something together? Just let me know.
All right, yeah, I'll email you, and we could get Harold on the show.
Yeah, get Harold on.
Because sometimes I need a decoder ring to understand what Harold's telling me, too. I love him. He is like unbelievable, but sometimes I'm on the other end of the microphone. I'm trying to think of my next question. I'm thinking, I'm probably going to sound really, really stupid, But, yeah, he's unbelievable. I love having him on the show. And I'll tell you, his interviews take off. People love to listen to his stuff.
They do, and that's the thing. He is somewhat mesmerizing.
Yeah.
People do love to listen to him, no matter what he's saying.
He's great.
So it's always a good idea to have Harold.
Well, we've been another 2 hours. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, it's good.
Okay.
All right, Cara. So I'll have the show out. Give me about a week or so, but
great.
and I'll have it out. And it's great talking to you as always. And that concludes my interview with Cara St. Louis, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Cara's book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, which she co-authored with Harald Kautz-Vella, can be purchased at Amazon.com in both paperback and Kindle. Cara's website is Vortex, Conscious and Courageous, and can be reached by going to vortexcourage.me, where you can find many fine articles, including material by Harold. Please see the show notes below for any additional links. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit my website, laboroflovemusic.com, to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.